Elon Musk is a hack. Elon Musk is a deranged showman who is tepidly responsible only for the investments necessary to get his bullshit lunacy projects off the ground, and is not himself an engineer or a science genius.
I think what Elon's done with Tesla is fantastic. It's probably the biggest single contribution to showing us that electric cars are part of how we solve climate change. And now he's got a carbon removal challenge. So we need more Elon Musks.
I'm a well-known Tesla skeptic, and
But it keeps defying expectations. You have to give it that.
Somehow it's levitating, and I think Elon Musk is the greatest salesman in the world. He paints this vision of an unlimited future. It's like Elon Musk has been beamed down from another planet to show us mortals how to run a company.
His quirky behavior, I went to college. I went to a really selective college where people were really smart and really weird. And the weirdness became an element of their behavior that I just came to expect with people who had sort of singular abilities to think or to innovate or to project what a future might be.
Elon Musk is one of the most controversial figures of the modern world. For a short time recently, he held the title of richest person alive with a net worth of over $150 billion. He's had an important hand in companies like PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX, and more, and he makes headlines more often than most celebrities. He's inspired millions by accelerating the growth of electric cars and spearheading the private space industry. But he's also hated by many, who believe he's nothing more than a self-aggrandizing grifter who mistreats the people around him and gets a kick out of putting himself in the spotlight. It seems hard to find anyone who has a lukewarm opinion on Elon Musk. You either love him or you hate him. And there's a lot more to Elon's story than meets the eye, so let's take a look at the evidence and you can decide for yourself. Elon Musk, visionary or villain?
To anyone I've offended, I just want to say, I reinvented electric cars, and I'm sending people to Mars in a rocket ship. Did you think I was also going to be a chill, normal dude?
Elon Musk was born in 1971 in Pretoria, South Africa. South Africa during this time was very different than it is today. The country was ruled by an authoritarian government that dictated how its society would operate using a racist system of laws called apartheid. Apartheid ensured that South Africa was dominated politically, socially, and economically by the nation's minority white population. Elon's mother, May, worked as a dietitian and model, and Elon's father, Errol, was a pilot, sailor, and engineer who made his money consulting and developing properties. Elon also has a younger brother, Kimball, and a younger sister, Tosca. When Elon was 9 years old, his parents divorced. When given the choice between going with his mom and staying with his dad, Elon chose his dad. He said later in an interview that he stayed because he didn't want his dad to be lonely. Elon would come to regret this decision massively. This time in Elon's life is the source of one of the most common criticisms of him, that he was raised by a rich family whose wealth came from apartheid. This sentiment is often repeated by people who claim Elon's dad owned an emerald mine which funded a privileged childhood. Errol was asked about the mine in an interview in 2018, and it turns out to be a pretty amazing story. In the mid-1980s, Errol and a co-pilot were flying a plane to England with the intention of selling the plane once they got there. Their flight plan included them stopping in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia to rest and refuel, but on the way there they learned that there was a religious holiday going on and space to park the plane was at a premium. What was supposed to be a free stopover was now going to cost them $2,000, so they decided to turn around and land at Lake Tanganyika. Coincidentally, once they landed, they ran into a group of Italian businessmen who were trying to buy an airplane. They went together to one of the Italians' offices where they opened their safe and gave Errol £80,000 for the airplane. Once he had the money in hand, one of the Italians then offered Errol half of an emerald mine for half the money he had just been given. Errol agreed, and his new half ownership of the mine went on to produce him emeralds for the next 6 years. Whenever Errol took his family on trips, he would bring the emeralds with them and sell them to local jewelers, and he would make his kids help sell them too. This led to the hilarious story of a young Elon Musk walking into Tiffany's on Fifth Avenue in New York City with emeralds in his pocket and selling them to the store. So it seems the claims of Elon's youth being privileged are true, but Elon has said if he could change anything about his youth, he would have gone with his mother to live a normal life rather than stay with his wealthy father. Elon said in an interview that his father was a terrible human being, and he told Rolling Stone, "You have no idea. My dad will have a carefully thought out plan of evil. He will plan evil. Almost every crime you can possibly think of, he has done. Elon didn't give a lot of details, but he did break down in tears during this interview, and he said that his dad has killed 3 people, but was later cleared of charges based on self-defense. Errol later went on to father a child with his own daughter-in-law, whom he had raised from 4 years old after divorcing her mother. When confronted about this, Errol said, "I have no stepdaughters or stepsons, I have 4 ex-wives." Elon has since cut off all communication with his father and vowed that none of his children will ever meet their grandfather.
It was very violent. It was not a happy childhood. My father has serious issues.
But Elon's childhood wasn't a complete waste. He has said that his father was rarely around and he had no nanny, so he was basically at home by himself the whole time he was growing up and entertained himself with books and computers.
I should say that, when I was a kid, I didn't really have any grand designs. The reason I started programming computers is because I like computer games. And I play lots of computer games, and I learned that if I wrote software and sold it, then I could get more money and buy better computers.
At 17 years old, Elon left South Africa bound for Canada. His goal was to eventually make it to Silicon Valley in California so he could keep creating technology, and he figured it would be easier to get into an American university if he transferred from Canada rather than overseas. He was right. After staying with family and friends and having no permanent place to stay in Canada, Elon transferred from Queen's University in Ontario to University of Pennsylvania, where he got 2 bachelor's degrees, one in economics and one in physics. Elon says after he got these degrees, he was $100,000 in debt. In 1995, Musk transferred to Stanford in California, but quickly dropped out to work on his first startup, along with his brother Kimball. The startup was called Zip2, an online city guide that was kind of like Google Maps before Google was even founded. Here's what Elon had to say about that time in his life.
Depending upon how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hard up we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night, 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say, particularly if you're starting a company.
In just 3 short years, Elon's first tech company was a massive success, and they sold the company to Compaq for $307 million. Elon's personal share, $22 million.
Just 3 years ago, I was showering at the Y and sleeping on the office floor. And now, obviously I've got a $1 million car and quite a few creature comforts. It's just a moment in my life.
Elon wasted no time starting his next company and set his sights on the financial world. About a month after selling Zip2, Elon and 3 business partners founded X.com. In the late 90s, there were no convenient ways for people to transfer money to each other. You either had to go to the bank and fill out a form and pay a fee to wire someone money, which was very slow and costly, or mail the money, which is risky and also slow. The general public also thought at the time that the internet was going to be a fad, not a real place to do serious business. Elon wanted to solve this problem and co-founded one of the world's first online banks with X.com. A lot of the coding was done by Elon himself, and he also poured almost all of his $22 million from Zip2 into this new venture, with the exception of his $1 million car. This was an all-or-nothing play. X.com was a real bank, which was FDIC insured, and the founders and engineers paved the way for the general public to feel comfortable banking online. It's a pretty common misconception that Elon founded PayPal. In fact, he founded a competitor of PayPal, and then the two agreed to merge only a year after Musk founded and became the CEO of X.com. With the launch and tricky merger behind him, Elon left the country on a trip that would turn out to be a massive mistake.
What happened?
Well, yeah, so I think it's not a good idea to leave the office when there are a lot of major things underway which are causing people a great deal of stress.
Yeah.
But it was a combination of
needing to raise money, and I'd gotten married earlier that year and not had any vacation or honeymoon or anything, so it was kind of a combined financing trip / honeymoon.
Yeah.
And and anyway, away for 2 weeks, and there was just so much. There was just a lot of worry, and that caused the management team to decide that I wasn't the right guy to run the company.
But after PayPal, Elon set his sights on the stars.
2001, was talking to a friend of mine, and he asked me what I was going to do after PayPal, and I thought, well, I was wondering, like, I'd like to get involved in space, but I just didn't think there was anything I could do as an individual, but I was curious as to when NASA would be sending a team to Mars, because that was always going to be the thing to do after the moon. I figured that there'd be some plan, and I'd just go to the website and I could read the schedule.
Then Mars occurs.
Oh yeah, it's like, okay, 2017, good, okay. But actually, there wasn't anything on the website, and or at least I thought, like, can I not find it? Like, what's going on here? But it turned out that that NASA had done a study on what it would cost to do a manned Mars mission, and this was under Bush the First, and in his first, he asked for a 90-day study shortly after taking office, and NASA came back with a $500 billion price tag. And he said, okay, maybe not. So then that got totally shelved, and it was like you were not allowed to talk about any kind of crewed mission to Mars at NASA. I tried to figure out how to do this with the proceeds that I had from PayPal, and I was able to figure out how to get the cost of the spacecraft down and the communications and the little greenhouse and everything, but the one thing I couldn't compress was the cost to launch, because there are only a few options, and the US options were way too expensive. And so I ended up going to Russia 3 times to try to buy the biggest ICBM in the Russian nuclear fleet.
That's where I'd start, yeah.
Yeah.
Go big or go home, right? Yeah.
I mean, okay. So that's when I said, okay, well, is there some way to affect the cost of space transport? And so I got together with a group of people over a series of Saturdays just to try to understand, is there something fundamentally super expensive about rockets, or can the cost be substantially improved? We had a bunch of those kind of brainstorming sessions, and I couldn't see any fundamental obstacle to improving the cost of rockets. So that's when I started SpaceX.
But the spacecraft industry is a small one, and the veterans are wary of outsiders. Plenty of private companies were already launching their own satellites, but none of them had ambitions to send humans to Mars. There were a lot of critics, including the first astronaut to walk on the moon.
But when critics say you can't do this, your answer to them is,
we've done it.
He's done it in partnership with NASA, which has given SpaceX technical advice and a contract worth up to $1.6 billion, mostly for 12 cargo flights to the space station. But SpaceX's lack of experience bothers some NASA legends like Apollo astronauts Neil Armstrong and Gene Cernan. They've testified to Congress that the Obama administration's drive to commercialize space could compromise safety and eventually cost the taxpayers.
Now is the time to overrule this administration's pledge to mediocrity.
You know, there are American heroes who don't like this idea. Neil Armstrong, Gene Cernan have both testified against commercial spaceflight in the way that you're developing it, and I wonder what you think of that.
I was very sad to see that, because those guys are, those guys are heroes of mine, so it's really tough. I wish they would come and visit and see the hardware that we're doing here. And I think that would change their mind.
They inspired you to do this, didn't they?
Yes.
Just 2 years after founding SpaceX, Elon began to focus on electric cars.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the origins of Tesla.
Sure. So with as mentioned, I was quite interested in electric cars from when I was doing my undergrad physics, and in fact, I originally came out to California to do a PhD at Stanford in applied physics and material science to work on ultracapacitors in electric cars. So it was
a longstanding interest of mine, and the internet kind of put that on hold for a few years. But then after PayPal, I decided I wanted to get back into electric vehicles and make something happen in that arena, particularly since GM had come out with the EV1, and I thought, okay, well, there's not really a need for a startup company to develop electric cars, because obviously GM is going to create the EV2 and the EV3, that's logical sequence, and we get increasingly get better and better with each iteration, and so not really need for a new company in that arena. But actually what happened was that after California changed the regulations to no longer require electric cars, GM recalled all the EV1s, and then just to make sure that nobody could get them back, they crushed them in a lot somewhere. So I thought, okay, well, we've got to try to create an electric car company. But it wasn't as though in creating these companies that we thought that we would be successful. I thought that the most likely outcome was failure, but it was still worth doing.
But again, Elon's involvement with Tesla is the source of a huge misconception. Elon didn't found Tesla, just as he didn't exactly found PayPal, but he did raise a lot of the funding for Tesla and helped shape it into what it is today. Here are the two true founders of Tesla and what they have to say about Elon.
There are a lot of people who don't realize you two started the company. How do you respond to people who think that Elon is the creator of Tesla?
Elon was, investor in Series A. He was very supportive always, financially and on the board. And then he became the CEO. He's actually the fourth, I think that's right, the fourth CEO of Tesla. And he has taken
Second chairman of the board.
Second chairman of the board. And he's taken it, to heights that are, fantastic. So he's done an amazing job. But yeah, and he was always supportive, from the beginning, but he wasn't the founder in the sense of he wasn't, we started it.
Well, I mean, this is one of the things that I found kind of fascinating about him is that he's actually accomplished some amazing things in his own right.
He's totally amazing.
Yeah, SpaceX is amazing, and he's done some interesting things with Tesla for sure. I'm not sure why he has to also say that he was a founder when he wasn't. I don't understand that.
Oh, yeah, whatever.
It's clear from this interview that the founders have a lot of respect for Elon and don't want to say anything bad about him, but they might have a little bit of resentment over him using the word founder to describe himself. And this seems to be a very common theme with Elon. While his lofty goals and funny cameos make headlines constantly, there seems to always be a constant stream of workplace horror stories that fly under the radar. A group of Tesla and SpaceX workers told Vanity Fair in an interview, employees at all of his companies check Musk's Twitter account first thing in the morning to see what disaster happened the night before and to decipher if it will lead to a new lawsuit, affect Tesla's stock price, or add to growing public resentment toward their CEO. We all wake up and look at it every day thinking, oh God, now what? Another person close to Elon said in the same article, there's a high level of degenerate behavior with Elon. There's a paranoia. Are you with me or against me? I genuinely want to leave the room sometimes when he walks in. All of these guys, I've spent time with them, Musk, Zuck, all of them, they all exhibit tendencies of total and complete pathological sociopathy. They don't, at their core, give a flying fuck about you or me as individuals. And Elon's interpersonal problems don't stop there. One of Elon's greatest strengths and weaknesses is Twitter. In the summer of 2018, 12 soccer players aged 11 to 16 and their 25-year-old assistant coach got trapped in a cave in Thailand.
How many of you? 13? Yeah, 13. Brilliant. Yeah.
Images everyone hoped, but no one expected to see. 12 boys and their soccer coach found alive inside this cave in Thailand.
We are coming. It's okay. It's okay. Many people are coming.
But even after the boys were located, getting them out was going to be nearly impossible. They were about 2 miles into the cave, and the divers were going to have to traverse multiple sections of flooded tunnels and dangerous passages to get the boys out. While the world watched the rescue attempts in horror on TV, Elon started tweeting. It started out pretty low-key, with some followers asking Elon to use his engineering teams to come up with a solution. He said the Thai government presumably had the situation under control, but that he was happy to help if possible. But as the search and rescue efforts dragged on day after day, Musk kept thinking about it and ended up sending engineers to the cave to see if they could come up with a solution. The next day, he started tweeting ideas about building a tube or submarine to get the kids out. His engineers built the submarine, but it wasn't used, and the kids were rescued by divers.
huge moment here as the 5th ambulance arrives, and what that means is that all 12 boys and their coach are now safely at Chiang Rai Hospital.
After the rescue chief, Vern Unsworth, had some words for Elon.
What your thoughts on Elon Musk's idea was?
And stick his submarine where it hurts. It just had absolutely no chance of working. He had no conception of what the cave passage was like. The submarine, I believe, was about 5'6" long, rigid, so it wouldn't have gone round corners or round any obstacles. It wouldn't have made the first 50 meters into the cave from the dive start point. Just a PR stunt.
Elon did not take kindly to this and apparently flew off the handle, calling Vern a pedo guy, despite having no evidence to support this. When challenged, Musk said, "You don't think it's strange he hasn't sued me?"
Elon Musk arrives at court in Los Angeles, the entrepreneur due to face the British diving specialist he accused of being a
But somehow, even though Vern sued him for a very public allegation, Elon won this case. But Elon's misadventures on Twitter were far from over. Back in 2010, Elon had taken Tesla public. He didn't like the idea of having to answer to shareholders, but he needed their money to keep the company running. Elon's been at odds in some ways with the stock market in general ever since Tesla went public. And it was at one point the most shorted stock on Earth, with people betting $250 million that Tesla would fail at one time. All this contention made Elon want to take the company private again so he could lead it with his vision rather than chase profits for shareholders. But this would require a massive amount of cash to buy back enough shares to do this. In August of 2018, just 1 month after the Thai cave diver incident, Elon tweeted, "I'm considering taking Tesla private at $420, funding secured." This tweet may not sound like a big deal to most people, but if this information turns out to be untrue, this is a very illegal tweet, because for a publicly traded company, it's illegal for the CEO to mislead people about the stock. Elon had been secretly meeting with Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund to secure money to buy Tesla back, and the SEC got involved. For anyone not familiar, the SEC stands for Securities Exchange Commission. They're a government agency that makes and enforces rules for companies and the stock market, and they do not mess around. In the end, Elon and the SEC came to a settlement where Elon had to step down as Tesla's chairman, personally pay a $20 million fine, and Tesla also had to pay a $20 million fine, and Elon agreed to have Tesla lawyers review his tweets about the company before hitting send. The Bird app is serious trouble, and even after all of this, Elon just couldn't stop tweeting and continues jabbing at the SEC on Twitter any chance he gets. After the SEC debacle, Elon made it almost an entire year without getting into a major controversy on Twitter. But then the pandemic happened, and as the world was contracting a deadly virus, Elon's phone was contracting a terrible case of bad tweets. At first, it started out relatively tame, with Elon saying the panic was dumb. Then, less than 2 weeks later, Elon offered to make ventilators at his Tesla factories when the US predicted a shortage. Just like the Thailand incident, it seemed to many like Musk was just inserting himself into a high-profile problem for PR points. As the year went on, Elon stayed skeptical. He said that COVID testing was bogus, and then his skepticism came to a crescendo during this interview.
Will you get a vaccine? What do you do with your own family? You won't get a vaccine. Why is that?
I'm not at risk for COVID, nor my kid.
Mm-hmm. So you won't do that?
No.
And what do you do now? Do you just go to work? Is that how you're conducting yourself and your family?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This entire time, SpaceX has been at work through this entire thing. We didn't skip a day. We had national security clearance because we're doing national security work. We sent astronauts to the space station and back. Tesla has been, apart from several weeks where we're shut down by the state and then an overzealous Alameda County, which is a travesty. But apart from that, we've been making cars this entire time, and it's been great.
He has since backpedaled a bit and now says he supports the vaccine and that the science is unequivocal. Which brings us to the present day. Tesla has sold over 500,000 cars last year and continues to lead the world in popularizing electric vehicles. SpaceX has launched over 100 successful missions and even brought astronauts up to the space station, and it continues to set world records all the time. But meanwhile, Elon continues to tweet. manipulating Bitcoin and whatever other cryptocurrency he's into this week. I think at the end of the day, if I'm personally trying to figure out if Elon is a visionary or villain, it's impossible to overlook his ambitious goals of saving our species from our dependence on fossil fuels and making human life interplanetary. These goals are something I think he really believes in, because if he didn't, he could have put his money into something more profitable and less contentious. He could have stayed in Silicon Valley inventing apps and widgets and websites and be exponentially richer than he is now. But it's also impossible for me to ignore all this other stuff. I truly think on a personal level, he's probably a jerk, and that's a massive understatement. I don't think I would enjoy working for him. I don't think I would like him if I owned Tesla stock. I don't think I would like him if I owned Bitcoin or any other crypto. And there are so many other things I didn't have time to touch on in this video, both good and bad. Elon's constantly acting like both a visionary and a villain. I can certainly understand the perspective of people who think the word businessman is an insult and how every time Elon shows up on Rick and Morty or Meme Review or SNL that it's just some conman asshole self-promoting again. But at the end of the day, I don't think Elon cares what we think of him, and nothing you or I can say or do is going to stop him. So we're really left with one choice. Do we ignore him entirely and shun him as a villain? Or do we appreciate what he's doing for humanity and get excited about the future? That is for you to decide. If you enjoyed this video, or even if you hated it, leave me a comment telling me why, and check out this video I made about Carlos Matos and the fate of BitConnect, or this other video I made about NFTs. Thanks for watching, stay weird internet, see you next time.